So, warm welcome to the podcast, Alf, Coerver Coaching co-founder, and my dad. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most important topics in Coerver Coaching, 1v1. Before we get into the topic, I want to shout out our first 5 YouTube members. It's Alex, Amazing Game, Giuseppe, Omar, and Gambo. Guys, thanks very much for being YouTube members. Anyone else, please click the link in the bio and you'll see all the benefits of being a YouTube member with Coerver Coaching. I also want to shout out all of the players that we've worked with recently that have asked us to shout them out on the podcast. You know who you are, and look forward to training next week. So, Dad, let's talk about 1v1. Why is it such an important topic in the game?
Well, I think the purpose of 1v1, Jim, is to create space. And space, whether it's grassroots or in the pro game, it gets restricted as you go older and players get more physical. So 1v1 has a purpose, and that purpose is to create space to pass, to shoot, or run with the ball, or to protect the ball. So it's crucial, I think, in the past game, but certainly in the future game.
Yeah, I was going to ask Coerver Coaching is 40 years old. You've been in the game for longer than that. How have you seen 1v1 evolve from your beginning, I guess, experience in football and where it is now in the game and why it's relevant now in the game?
Yeah, so the origin, before Charlie and I started Coerver Coaching in '84, Will Coerver had this idea that you could use great players to teach young players. And in those days, it was watching film. And he basically, this is pre-'84, looked at Beckenbauer, at Van Basten, who's Dutch, and because Will was Dutch, obviously, and Johan Cruyff. And he devised 26 1v1s. I'm talking about 1981 now, 80. And there were 26 because the alphabet was A to Z. And then when Charlie and I took over or started Coerver Coaching in '84, up to this date, now we have 77.
Yes.
But the evolution up from all those 40 years was that in 2003, Charlie and I looked at 8 great players, including Beckenbauer, Cruyff, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, Rivellino, Stan Matthews. Of course, we suddenly found that the kids didn't know their names. And so in 2003, Charlie and I decided we wanted to label these, what we call moves, 1v1 moves. And we came up with 48 1v1 moves. And we kept the name Beckenbauer and Rivellino and Matthews, the 8. But we actually put labels on them. So, for example, as you know, I worked in Japan a lot. You could say that the Stanley Matthews move was the drag push. It no longer became the Stanley Matthews move apart from describing the origin, but it became the drag push, the drag whip, the drag sidestep. And then if there was a Japanese or a Premier League player, say Bellingham, you could say he does the drag push.
Yes.
So it allowed us then, because Coerver's global, to actually apply our labels, and that from 48 to today, there's 77.
And for grassroots coaches, because remember our aim of this podcast is to provide useful information to grassroots coaches. Why is 1v1 an important topic for them, and how can they think about it in terms of their sessions?
Yeah, so why it's important. Let's take what's, when you're a soccer teacher, soccer coach. So there's the technical, the skill part. So the skill part actually improves your ball mastery, your comfort and confidence with the ball. If you like, the strength part, when you're working a lot with the ball, especially repetition on 1v1, because it's learned through repetition.
Yes.
Your legs get stronger, you become more flexible, you become more coordinated. Tactically, because football's a team game, it's exactly what I said to you before. It creates space. That space could be another goal chance.
Yes.
And then mentally, so I've tried to cover all the 4 cornerstones, so they say, of coaching. Mentally, it gives you confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, so my advice to coaches is, remember, you've got these 4 components: the skills, the tactics, the physical part, and the mental part, which is hugely important.
I think the thing that we see, and I coach under 13s, boys and girls, is that the kids enjoy it too. So for coaches listening to this, if you don't include 1v1 in your sessions at the moment, or 2v2, kids enjoy the competitive element of it. I think they also like to see the challenge of it.
Yes.
It's something that if you put at the beginning of your session, it grabs the attention of the kids immediately, and particularly with boys, they can run off steam, and it gets them engaged and ready to go for the rest of your session as that sort of develops.
I
think that's a key benefit as well of the work at the grassroots level.
I think at the grassroots level, even at the so-called pro academy level, at that age, if you don't really like what you're doing, you won't you're not motivated, right?
Yes.
So that's why in Coerver, when we work with all the coaches, we're saying plan your session really carefully, because the sort of blueprint has to be love, enjoyment. And therefore, and 1v1, like you say, because football is a competitive sport, is the first competition.
Yes.
And you could say that even when you're playing up to 11v11, it's 1v1 contests all over the field.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about 11v11. Obviously, then positions come into it. How relevant is 1v1 for all positions, including defenders?
Yeah, so recently, as you know, we looked at the 77 1v1s. Charlie and I looked at the 77. And we picked 8 changes of direction, 8 stops and starts, and 8 feints. So, and then the reason we picked them was from the 77 is which were the easiest for the youngest kids, because some are very complex. Which part of the field are they effective in? That's really important, because a lot of coaches ask me this, you have a 1v1, where should I use it? Or where should I advise the player to use it? Obviously, it's a player's decision, but you can help. But okay, so let's take the change of direction. There's 8 of them. They're very good for defenders. Especially now the trend is to play with the goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. So the 8 change of direction have one commonality, and that's to shield the ball. So let's say you get the ball from the goalkeeper and you're pressed, but 2 or 3 players, 11 won't press you, 2 or 3 will press you. Then you can use one of the change of direction, say the inside foot twist off, where your back turns so even if somebody hits you, it's a foul, right? And then you pass it back to the goalkeeper starts again. So the change of direction, very, very good for defenders.
Can I just jump in? A quick observation. I watched the Real Madrid-Liverpool game last night.
Yes.
And you saw Van Dijk do that move, inside foot twist off, all the time. But also you saw Mbappe outside foot twist off all of the time to get out of trouble. And it's interesting position-wise how you've got obviously 2 of the best players in their respective positions more or less using the same move, but in different parts of the field to do different things.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say it, because obviously Van Dijk, growing up in the Dutch system, went through Coerver, right? But Mbappe was actually, Gerard Houllier said that he actually went through the Coerver program, because, I worked with the French Federation for 12 years. And at Clairefontaine, all the 1v1s are Coerver. Yeah. And Gerard, he's passed now, but about 2 years ago, actually said, well, he's a product of Coerver. Yeah. So anyway, those 2 players. The stops and starts, the 8 of them, are very good on the wings. And they're used to actually create space to cross the ball. So there's 8 of those on the left and on the right. And then the feints, a feint is when an opponent's in front of you, are designed really for the last 35 yards. And as you know, the last 35 yards, normally you're outnumbered. The attackers are outnumbered. There's little space, there's little time. Coerver's really valuable, especially in that last 35 yards. And so Charlie and I picked 8 1v1s that we think work there and that kids, even under 12, can use.
Yes. And for grassroots coaches, in your session planning, you wouldn't have to introduce all 8. You might introduce a couple, right? Where you're trying to work with all the players on those couple for the season, which will give them that ability then to create space to do what they need to do.
Yes. So a really good point, Jim, because if you put too much in your session plan, you're going to compromise your game at the end, which is the funnest. That's what the kids want, right? Yeah. So that's in general session planning. Less is more. Yeah. And so out of these 8, I'd probably stick with 1 or 2 for couple of months,
Yeah.
then introduce another one or two,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have them for 3 or 4 years, the players.
And the kids will decide what works for them, right?
They'll
They'll get
decide.
one or two that
Yeah.
they recall when they need to under pressure
Yes.
that they feel comfortable with. And you always say this about coaches: if you can't demonstrate, use a player that can demonstrate to show, because demonstration is obviously important.
Yes.
For 1v1 for
Yes.
kids to understand what you're trying to get them to do.
Yes, yes. So that's another tip. Really, is so the curriculum, the drills and games of 1v1 are there. Then comes to your question is, well, how best to teach it? I mean, what tips can we give coaches to be able to teach effective use of 1v1? That means, to do something for your team.
Yes.
And in Coerver, as you know, we've got something called the skills bridge, where let's say you take the drag scissors, it's a 1v1 move, and you repeat it. And then what you do is you add what you call limited pressure, the defender doesn't tackle. Then you add full pressure, the defender tackles. And it's a gentle way of actually introducing the player and getting the player to be competent. And it's backed by science. Professor Erickson, it's called, his theory, people may have heard, is the 10,000 hours, but actually I spoke to him, and he wasn't never the 10,000 hours. It was a guy called Malcolm Gladwell. But Erickson's theory was that it was planned, deliberate practice for increasing difficulty. So we took that and called it the Coerver Skills Bridge. And the Coerver Skills Bridge is a way to teach effective use of 1v1.
Yes, and I guess it links in well to the next question, which is around, can 1v1 be taught? Because some people, especially I guess back in the day with George Best and Maradona and Messi latterly, said, well, they're blessed by God, and that level can't be taught. Yeah, there's going to be something in that at that level, but can the topic of 1v1 be taught to any child?
The quick answer is yes. I mean, it's a question of how well they do it. So it is a teaching topic for a coach. It's a coaching topic, and it can be taught. But I can anecdotally speak from my professional experience. I worked in Brazil for the Brazilian FA, actually with many members of the '82 World Cup, because they wanted to fast track them to become coaches. And there was a guy called Carlos Alberto Pereira, who's technical director. And the first thing, because I was a fan of Brazil when I was a kid, it was Brazil and the 1v1 players, Grinch, people that the listeners maybe not remember. And Carlos told me that they came from the streets. Now, you've heard about street football. And even Messi and Maradona and all the great 1v1, George Best, who George I knew too, that it was these was when you spent hours and hours and hours playing football. Generally, that era has gone more or less nearly everywhere in the world. Every kid's got an iPhone. They're doing many other things. So it was only the number, again, back to the science, it was the hours they spent playing football that made them great 1v1 players, great shooters, great passers. And that slowly, as society got affluent, those hours became less and less. So there's this nature-nurture. If you've got all those hours, it would seem to me that, yes, you can teach it if you've got the hours. The difficulty is you haven't got the hours. Yeah. That's why the Coerver app is so good, Jim, because, even in grassroots football, and you know better than me, you probably train once a week, 60 minutes.
Yes.
Honestly, it's just not enough. You've got to, especially for 1v1, is that you've got to do got to persuade the players. And I think that's why the Coerver app works very well, because there's something for them to practice at home.
Yeah, that you have to do. So your point is, grassroots coaches, you need to inspire your players to do work, especially in this topic, outside of training, because we're only, and I'm only working once a week with our players for 60 minutes, like you said. So how do you inspire? So technology like the application is a good idea. Yeah. Great players, pointing to great players like Mbappe, Messi, etc., is a way to excite young players as well.
Yes.
I think their teammates, their own teammates, is also a way that they can become interested in the topic as well. Yeah. They all know who the best 1v1 players are in their team, and I think they're excited by that, and they find that cool as well. So I think coaches, that could be a tip as well. You don't always have to point to the pro game. You could point to your number 10 in your own team or your centre forward or whatever that does 1v1 particularly well, which can help motivate and improve your players within your team.
Yes, and I think that's a really good point, Jim. And I think the previous point you made about, well, if coaches feel uncomfortable, because obviously with any skill, passing, receiving, 1v1, running with ball, shooting, it's difficult. You can't really put it on a whiteboard and you can't really talk about it. Tactics you can go on a whiteboard and write out tactics. So demonstration is important, but many coaches, let's say you've got a knee like mine, or you're not comfortable. You can always use one of your players, but I wouldn't talk a skill, if that makes sense.
Yes,
I would show a skill, because I think that's how, according to Dr. Bain, my good friend, world famous neurologist, the brain actually visually retains the teaching, whatever you're teaching, and if they see it, it embeds it. So the information is coming through the eyes, not through the ears.
Yes, yeah, that's that demonstration point, particularly for 1v1s, and as they get more complex, maybe as well. So you talked about a little bit at the beginning of this conversation about the evolution, the history of Coerver in this topic. Can you just summarize that? And then, that was 40 plus years ago now. Can you also talk a little bit about how, in a way, it was so forward thinking in terms of its relevance in the game right now, and probably its future relevance as well?
Yes. So when we started, traditional license courses all over the world were really centered on tactics, and there were individual topics taught, but and it would be a something on the side, really. It was basically everything. Every coaching program, every coaching course was based on the tactical element, the team element, and what I think Coerver, as I think I told you a few weeks ago, I went to see Arsene Wenger, and I've known Arsene since Japan days, and he said to me, "What you guys have done," meaning Coerver, is invented a curriculum for the ball, and in these 40 years, I hadn't thought of it like that, and it's that simple, is that we've created over 40 years, and 1v1 being a central part of this. Like I said, there's 77 1v1s. It's just like a menu in a restaurant. You don't have to use 77. And what we created was a body of work. And then we had to then explain how that individual work, some of it isolated, was relevant to the team game. And I'm going to tell you, the simple answer was it solved the space problem. It solved the skill in the space, but also, the space, 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11, you've got so much space. When you had 1v1, you could create the space within those parameters, right? And when you've got more space, you've got more time generally. And when you've got more time, you certainly become a little more confident, less frightened, less nervous. So, as I said to you, the mental component is so important. So that space-time, if you gave the solution to the space problem and you gave the player a little more time, they'd be less nervous.
Yes.
A lot of 1v1 is very risky. Even Messi's stats, 57%, I think.
We'll go through some of the stats in a minute.
Right. But you lose. Even the greatest player loses the ball once every two. It can put you off, right? So another thing is, it's okay for risk. Obviously, where you do it. But when you're younger, 8 to 12, honestly, who cares? I think the big thing is to try to encourage them to try it. And I think the Coerver Skills Bridge is a way of actually slowly, gently, especially for the under 12s, getting them to, I like this move. And as you so correctly say, let's leave aside the 77, but let's look at the 8 Coerver classics in each change of direction, feint, stop and start. If you teach your boys and girls over these 4 years, between 8 and 12, Jim, I'll tell you, they'll pick, like I did, the drag push when I was a player was my favorite. That's why it resonated so much with Stan.
Yeah.
We became friends. You will choose one.
Yes.
Peter Beasley, the shimmy. Pete always used to use the shimmy.
Yeah.
the grassroots kids are going to be no different from Stan and Pete, and Messi always cuss the ball. So they're not going to be different. They're going to be exactly the same. They'll pick one they like.
They'll select one. I think the other thing about the 1v1 topic, just to summarize before we get into simple points for coaches to be able to think about delivering the topic or deliver the topic, is the excitement of 1v1, right? It's one of the reasons everyone loves football, I think.
Yes.
Watching last night, again, going back to Real Liverpool game, when you see Salah or Mbappe on the ball, it's along with the intensity of the game and the big tackling and all that. It's the most, for us, I would say it's probably the most exciting part of that game when Salah's 1v1 against a player, for example. And I think, again, to help kids fall in love with the game, it's a powerful tool to use, for us all to use.
Well, I think so, because obviously, like I say, it is a team game, but 1v1, if you're successful, it gives you confidence. And if you're not successful, it builds resilience. So in other words, you lose the ball, you want to win it back again. So it's also a life lesson, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You take risk, and if it doesn't work, okay, try again.
Okay. All right. No, that's really good. So we've got two more sections that we're going to go over in this podcast. So one is simple tips for coaching 1v1 effectively. I'm going to give you the tip, and if you could just give me a line or two on each tip, and then we'll get into a play discussion, because when we talk about 1v1, we'd be remiss not to discuss the great players of the game. So tips for coaching 1v1 effectively. First one, start simple.
Yes. So. If you look at let me just focus on the Coerver classics, the 8 change duration, the 8 stops and starts. So I don't want to confuse coaches to go to the Coerver library for 77.
Yeah.
Stick to these 8, right? If you look at them, like dance steps. So let's say the side step. There's a move called the side step. It's step right, then go left. It's a 2-step. Mm-hmm. If you do the drag push, it's almost a 3-step. It's a 2.5 step. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, what you do is you break down, like we did when we invented them or created them. We looked at videos. We slow motion the videos, Charlie and I. We spent hours looking at videos. And then we saw the movement, like Garincha used to do something, great Brazilian player, or Stan used to do it, the drag push. And we slow motioned it down and broke it into steps. So start simple is the first part of the skills bridge.
Yeah.
Which is, but a tip I'd give you, once they start slow, the sooner they speed it up, the better their brain will wire it in an unconscious way. In other words, when you think about a skill, it becomes slower. If it's embedded unconsciously, it gives you time. So it relates to the time and space thing we were talking about.
Yeah.
So although I'd say start slowly, try to speed it up as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next tip is for coaches out there, how to progress it. So you add passive, then you add how you go on that step-by-step journey.
So it's called graduated pressure, and it's in the middle of the Coerver skills bridge, and it has these parts. The first part is called limited pressure defender. That means the defender doesn't tackle. The defender just shuts the space between the 1v1 player, but doesn't tackle. So you see the coach is controlling that. And then what you have is graduated pressure, where what you do is you place the defender in a position where the attacker's got an advantage. So maybe the defender is to your right and you're going straight. So you've got an advantage. But whatever happens, but the defender's trying to win the ball, but you give the advantage by the logistic of where you put the attacker to the player. And the third part is full pressure. They face each other equally. Defender trying to win the ball 100%. Okay. So that middle part has 3 parts.
Okay. Tip number 3, encourage decision making. How can you help coaches do that?
Okay. So first, by accepting, and for years I didn't get this, that when it becomes full pressure, you cannot make a decision for the player on the ball. In fact, it's confusing and detrimental for you to make a decision, because if you have to make the decision, then I'm going to learn the decision. So the first thing is, like in Japan, there was a saying, silence is golden. When you get to full pressure, you've got to rely on them to make decision and them to make mistakes and them then say, okay, I did this too soon, I did this too late. Of course, later on in your feedback, you can always say, well, look, you're touching it's called a double touch. If I'm facing you on a feint and I double touch the ball, you just press me and I've got less time and space. So you as a coach, you're looking for problem solution, but when they're doing it, don't interfere. In my view, right? Is that if you have to tell them when and where to pass, shoot, run with the ball, 1v1, honestly, they're not going to be able to add that essential decision-making component to the skill.
Right. Tip number 4, reinforce success. And maybe you could talk about this in terms of training day and match day.
Yeah. So reinforcing success obviously depends on success, what your definition of success means. So on training day, it could be, and with grassroots, it's really difficult because you know better than me and your coaches that you have players of different abilities. With the so-called academy players, with great respect to my colleagues in the pro game, the players are at roughly the same standard. So you can actually sort of expect so much from them. You know, they've been chosen because of they're talented in whatever that word means. They're proficient at what they do. And with grassroots, I think success means looking at a kid that you've got and see where they were a few months before and where they were. I mean, I'm talking about a few months, not next week or 5 minutes. And so success in grassroots is measured by how does that kid improve over that season, whether it's their game understanding or their skills. And so that's, I would say, requires patience. That's why I was never a very good coach, because I don't have patience, especially at a grassroots level, right? So you have to wait, and then you can't compare them with another player in grassroots.
Yeah.
You know, because I've got 4 grandkids, as you know, and I go and watch them, and I hear a lot of the feedback from coaches and parents, and much of it's not helpful. It's no criticism, because they do a great job. I mean, give their time and etc. So I'm not here to criticize, but I would say that it's not helpful to compare one player with another player, one player's success with another player's success or failure.
Yes.
That comparison, I think, is unhelpful.
And you've always said also think about a match day as an extension of training, in that, you know, we're looking for consistent learning over both. And that's an important point, I think, for grassroots coaches as well, to think about. I know it's difficult because parents and yourself would expect a result on match day, but it is a perspective, I think, that will help your coaching if you do think of match day as not maybe completely as an extension of training, because the outcome is important, but influence and think about it in those terms as well.
Yeah. So especially at the moment we're talking about 1v1, and even for Messi, you know, his stats are only 57%. So you can imagine how difficult it is for other players. I think what we've got to do. So football's a competitive game, and you can't say it's not important to win, because they think it's important to win. But with kids and with grassroots, I think the coach probably needs to explain, especially the parents and to themselves. You know, if I was to explain to myself, there's a difference between coaching winning and coaching development. So winning is always measured by the score, 2-0, 3-0, etc. Development is measured by, is your number 3 getting better? Or did your number 7 do 4 good things in the game, or 3 good things in a game? So you can say that's 3 goals for them. So in other words, your feedback actually in these very delicate ages, between 8 and 12 especially, the feedback of the coach, the feedback of the parent, where okay, we lost 3-0, but you did 3 really good things.
Yeah, that perspective, that understanding.
Comparing it, that's winning.
Yeah.
So you're kind of redefining winning.
Yep. Yeah. Last question, and last tip, and we've talked about it a lot, is the importance of coaching 1v1 to all positions. So the relevance of attackers, midfielders, goalkeepers now even, right? Or less so, or that's more about touch and passing.
Yeah,
Although you do see some goalies getting into 1v1s now.
I don't think I can sit here and recommend that you. I think your goalkeeper should take part in the 1v1 drills at practice day because it improves their footwork, right?
Yeah.
But no, not on match day.
But who is it? Is it Alisson that always does the hook turn, the Cruyff? One of the keepers I've got to forget now. There's a Premier League keeper that often looks to hit the ball, then Cruyff turns and goes the other way.
Yeah. Again, I think in training, great.
Yeah.
But
match day.
No.
So yeah, just summarise again the importance of maybe the outfield positions. Then why you want to teach this topic to them.
So the defenders with change of direction would shield the ball. But after you shield it, you've got to pass it because in your last third, it's very dangerous for you if you lose it there. So the change of direction, they Coerver classics to shield the ball and then pass it to a goalkeeper or pass it forward or whatever but it's to protect the ball from the pressers, the strikers. On the wings, it's the stops and starts, where it just means there's 8 of them. Stop and start's very simple. It means what it says. There's 8 different labels, 8 different moves that you running with the ball. You either slow down and then go again, or you completely stop and go again.
Yes.
And then the 8 that are in the last 30 yards of the goal are to create a space to shoot.
Yeah.
Because you're blocked normally. You're outnumbered.
Yeah. Well, the stops and starts is a good segue into our conversation about great 1v1 players. And basically, we're going to quickly talk about Messi, and then we'll get into a couple of other players as well. So we did some stuff on ChatGPT looking at Messi's stats over his career. Like you said, he's got a 57% success rate in 1v1s, and he's got the highest goal scoring or goal creating actions after the 1v1 out of any player in recorded history as well. So can you talk about just some observations about what Messi does well, and then the importance to actually leading to goal assists or creations or shots or goals?
Well, again, anecdotally, Jim, and you were here. You remember we went to Argentina and I did a podcast with Messi's coach when he was under 17, when he won the Olympic gold.
Yeah.
And so Messi is my all-time. Well, it's Messi. I like Charlie. I like. Stan was a great player, but Messi, I think, okay. So remember, I talked to Messi's coach and asked him the question you're asking me: what makes Messi so special, especially in 1v1? And he said 2 things: is one, he has total focus, and 2, when he loses the ball, he'll fight back for it. And I, he didn't talk about his skill, etc. These were both sort of character or personality traits.
Yeah.
And that total focus and that resilience of when he loses the ball, he'll go and fight for it. Because a lot of people think he walks around, etc. But on the ball, if you watch him when he loses the ball, he's immediately back after the person.
Sure.
Yeah.
And his 1v1 superpower, he has them all, but the stops and starts thing, how he controls his speed, his speed and his opponent's speed would that be the standout quality one of the standout qualities that he has?
I think he's the best stop and start player that I've ever seen. And so that's to do with your timing and when and where. So in 1v1, you always got how, which is you break down and you teach, and then you've got the when and where. The when and where is a mental thing. You decide, your brain decides that. He has almost perfection in when and where to do it. The skill he got, I remember you telling me when you were working at Adidas in Germany, and the coach, Messi's coach, told me that he practices an hour before everybody and he practices an hour after everybody, just with the ball, him and the ball. So he's got that, like in Coerver we say, ball feeling. So he's got the skill, but what he's got, the intelligence of when and where to use the skill.
Yeah.
And the stops and starts are his classic.
So it's interesting because that's his classic, and other players that have high percentages in terms, they call it take on, so success rate of 1v1.
Yes.
And I'll just reel off a few names here. Hazard and Neymar are almost up there in terms of the success rate.
Yeah.
Ribery, Robin, Ronaldo, Iniesta, and now Doku, and obviously Maradona. what's interesting, they've all got their own 1v1 super skill. So if you think about Iniesta, for example, it was almost like a subtle way he'd take players out, right? It was an efficient way that he'd take players out versus Doku. It's a powerful way that he's beating people. Are there any other players there that you want to comment on that you think coaches can get, tips from or inspiration from in how they teach?
Yes, well, I think obviously in the internet and on the Coerver app where we've actually got videos of all these moves, right? So the coaches should look at these moves, and when on our app, I think it's slow motion too. You can watch it in slow motion so you understand it. But one is called the full pull spin, and that's the so-called Maradona move. Before Charlie and I gave it a label, and Maradona was. I would say the second player to Messi as far as 1v1. If you go on YouTube and watch the World Cup in Mexico, when he basically won the World Cup for Argentina through 1v1. I mean, against Belgium, he must have gone past 4 players and scored.
Yeah.
You never see that now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's but the commonality between Messi and Maradona rather than the other players was cutting the ball. So cutting the ball in Coerver, we've got the inside foot cut, outside foot cut, twist-offs, is actually when somebody's approaching you, you cut the ball across your body, and so the ball moves one way, your opponent will move the other way, and then you cut it back. Maradona and Messi, and it's to do with flexibility of the ankle, it's to do with the right time. But that commonality of cutting the ball was Messi and Maradona.
And I know I talked a lot about Salah in this podcast, but he does that well, particularly in the box. And he touches it a lot in the box, which is different to, the stats around 1 and 2 times, two-time touching, touches in the box for finishes, etc. But he's a bit of an anomaly, Salah, right? Because he does touch the ball and he cuts the ball a lot when he's in the box, and that's different to everyone.
Well, not really, because what's happened in the last 5 years is it's become common for right-footed players to play on the left and left-footed players on the right, right? So Dembele is the same, right? The Paris Saint-Germain winger, the Georgian player, is the same. When you put a right-footed player on the left side, the reason is they have to cut in. They want to shoot with their left foot if they're on the right side, right? And therefore, they have to sometimes take that extra touch because the goalkeeper and the defense, of course, move across to block them. But so that extra touch, sometimes people say, well, that's a disadvantage. But in the case of Dembele and Salah, etc., because they're right-footed players, they're left-footed players playing on the right side, when they cut in, it's to shoot with their left foot. They look and see where if they're being blocked. As soon as they see the space, they shoot.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they take an extra touch to go beyond and find that gap.
Yeah.
And that's become now it's almost a top level standard. The right-footed player on the left, left-footed player on the right.
Yeah, Wayne Rooney was making this point on his podcast the other day about how inverted wingers, basically, the importance of the number 9 in terms of goal contributions has reduced, right?
Yeah.
10 years ago plus, number 9s with a goal scorer as a striker was that was their job. Now it's the wide players that are as important as the striker in chipping in with goals.
Yes.
And it's interesting what you say about
grassroots. Unfortunately, not the problem, and that's why Coerver is so indispensable. Is grassroots players are usually one-footed. And the beauty of Coerver ball mastery is that by the time they're 12, we aim through the Coerver ball mastery curriculum to make players two-footed. In the pro game, when people say, "Oh, Messi's only left-footed," he's not. I've seen him; he's not only left-footed. No pros only one-footed. At the grassroots, they are. So this notion of putting a right-footed player on the left and a left-footed player on the right is more difficult in grassroots, but it's just as dangerous if you do have that sort of player.
Okay, Dad, we've got some questions from our Instagram colleagues or followers around the 1v1 topic. First question from Wayne. Wayne, what's the best method to get U7 kids to transfer the skill moves into their 1v1s? He's finding it a real challenge at the moment. So I guess he's looking for how you transfer practice at training, the 1v1 work that you do in training, to effective use on game day.
Yeah. So answer that question, I've got to put it in context. Under eights is a different sort of priority, I think. I don't think it's so much coaching. I think you can show them the skill. I don't think you can be critical of the skill. I think that nearly all under eight, between 6 years old or 5 years old and 8 years old, your whole session should be made up of games. Very little coaching. I think with the 1v1s that we've talked about on this program, I would probably start them when they're 8 or 9 years old. I wouldn't really go into the Coerver library with under eights and say, maybe there's one that's called the side step and the step on, maybe two.
Okay.
Those work with them on that. But again, if you tell them when and where to do it, they're not going to learn.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Ollie Bren asks, do academies in the foundation phase focus mainly on 1v1s? Before you answer, we were lucky enough to be at Nottingham Forest last week, and I know at the foundation phase that's their absolute focus, to ensure that each of their players is proficient at 1v1, and they've got all sorts of innovative ways of working to encourage that, and we're hoping to have Nathan from the club on soon on the podcast. But can you talk about maybe some of the other clubs and how they approach it, because I assume it varies.
So yes, anecdotally I can talk about it, because in 2010 I was appointed the technical advisor to the Premier League when they introduced a program called EPPP. And we work with all the coaches of every Premier League club, who, especially the 8 to 13 group, and Coerver Ball Mastery and 1v1. And over a year, we went to every club. And if you even now go to Liverpool or Arsenal, etc., even Juventus. Remember when Juventus, when I walked in the office, the coach had every Coerver tape. Yeah. So the answer is yes. 1v1 in the pro clubs is basically Coerver.
Yeah. And mandatory requirement or topic.
Yes, I think mandatory
in the foundation phase.
Mandatory in that they think it's a DNA that their top level players should have. Yeah.
Okay. Verona asks, from what age should 1v1 start?
Well, I think like when they're 4 or 5, you just let them, run with the ball and have contests. I think formal, if you like, when you start introducing them to the Coerver moves, should probably be after 8 years old.
Okay. Yeah. After 8. Okay. And then the last question is, where can you find the 8 skill moves for the Coerver Classics? Well, I can ask this question. It's from Rashead, and they're on the Coerver app, and we'll put a link in the bio. Thanks very much for the question. Okay, let's do something. Last thing on 1v1, and it's something that's a bit of a Instagram, I guess, exercise or game, and it's about players, and you have to choose which player you like, and we hopefully find the winner. So Ribery versus Robin.
Robin.
Robin versus Neymar.
Neymar.
Neymar versus Doku.
Neymar.
Neymar versus Iniesta.
Neymar.
Neymar versus Henry.
Neymar.
Neymar versus Ronaldinho.
Ronaldinho.
Ronaldinho versus Maradona.
Oh, God. Maradona.
Maradona versus George Best.
Oh, damn. You can't have a tie, can you?
No, you can't.
Maradona.
Maradona versus Messi.
Messi.
Well, that shot by. Really great conversation on 1v1. Thanks very much for the pod. And listeners, thanks very much. Please like and subscribe the podcast. See you next time.
Yeah.